somewhere in the Ural Mountains of Soviet Russia, on a slope so remote that the nearest town is 3 days' walk away. There is a mountain that the local people have refused to climb for generations. They call it Kholat Syakhl. In the Mansi language, that means dead mountain. In February of 1959, 9 people ignored that warning. By morning, all 9 were dead. And 65 years later, nobody, not the Soviet government, not modern investigators, not anyone, has been able to explain what happened on that mountain. This is their story. The group was led by Igor Dyatlov, 23 years old, a radio engineering student at the Ural Polytechnic Institute in Sverdlovsk. He was experienced, not a beginner playing at adventure. He had done trips like this before. The group he assembled were his peers, 8 of them, plus one war veteran named Semyon Zolotaryov, 42 years old, who had survived the Eastern Front. These were not people who frightened easily. Among them, Lyudmila Dubinina, 20 years old, Zina Kolmogorova, 22. They left on the 23rd of January, 1959. Their last photographs were taken the day before the mountain. They were laughing. On the evening of the 1st of February, their 9th day on the trail, they set up camp on the eastern slope of Kholat Syakhl. It was not the ideal location. There was a forested valley 1.5 kilometers below that would have offered shelter from the wind. Igor Dyatlov knew this. He chose the exposed slope anyway. Later, a surviving member who had turned back early speculated that Dyatlov simply didn't want to lose the altitude they had gained. A practical decision. A reasonable decision. The kind experienced mountaineers make every day. That one choice, to camp on the exposed slope instead of descending to the trees, is the reason we are still talking about this 65 years later. At some point during that night, investigators believe between 9 in the evening and midnight, something happened inside that tent. We don't know what. What we know is what the evidence showed when rescuers arrived weeks later. The tent had been cut open from the inside, not unzipped, not torn by storm. Cut, deliberately with a knife, from the inside. The cuts were made in a hurry, just large enough to crawl through, and then all 9 left. They left their boots lined up neatly by the entrance. They left their coats. 2 wore only socks. 1 had a single boot on one foot and nothing on the other. They ran downhill toward the tree line 1.5 kilometers below, in minus 30 degrees, in a blizzard. Whatever was inside that tent with them, they chose the mountain instead. When the first rescuers reached the tree line, they found the remains of a small fire near a large cedar tree. 2 bodies were at the base of that tree, Georgy Krivonishenko and Yuri Doroshenko. They were in their underwear, no coats, no boots. The branches of the cedar had been broken, snapped by hand, up to a height of 5 meters, in the dark, in minus 30. They had climbed that tree with bare hands to see something back up the mountain toward the tent. Rescuers noted the branches at the highest point had been broken recently, meaning they were still there, in that tree, after the others had already fled, watching. Whatever they saw from that height, they never came down again under their own power. The first 5 bodies were found within weeks, scattered between the cedar tree and the tent, as if they had tried to return but hadn't made it. Igor Dyatlov was found 300 meters from the tent, face up, frozen, reaching toward it. 300 meters. He almost made it back. The last 4 bodies were not found until May, buried under 4 meters of compacted snow in a ravine. And this is where the case changed. These 4 had injuries nobody could explain with weather or panic. A fractured skull, multiple rib fractures. The medical examiner compared the force to a high-speed vehicle collision. There were, and I want you to understand this clearly, no external wounds, no cuts, no bruising on the skin. Whatever crushed their ribs did so without leaving a mark on the outside of their bodies. And Lyudmila Dubinina had no eyes and no tongue. What I am about to tell you was not in the public case file. It was classified by the Soviet government and remained hidden for decades. Researchers only uncovered it after declassification in the 1990s. When investigators tested the clothing recovered from the bodies, specifically the clothing of those 4 found in the ravine, they found radioactive contamination. High levels, not trace amounts you might attribute to natural background radiation. Levels consistent with radioactive fallout, the kind associated with nuclear weapons testing. The nearest known Soviet test site was hundreds of kilometers away. The clothing with the highest contamination levels belonged to the victims with the most severe internal injuries. That connection between the radiation and the injuries was never explained in any official document. Over 65 years, researchers have proposed dozens of explanations: an avalanche, infrasound from the wind creating mass panic, a military weapons test, ball lightning, katabatic wind, a violent downdraft capable of throwing a person off their feet. The Soviet government's own investigators described the cause as, quote, a compelling natural force of unknown origin. Each theory has serious problems. The slope gradient was too shallow for a natural avalanche, and there was no debris. The tent had not been covered in snow when found, which any avalanche would have done. Infrasound is theoretical and has never been reproduced as a cause of mass panic in a controlled environment. The military test theory would explain the radiation, but does not explain the missing organs, which showed no signs of burning or external trauma. And katabatic wind, however violent, does not crush rib cages from inside a body without leaving a single mark on the skin. Every theory accounts for some of the evidence. Not one of them accounts for all of it. And that, right there, is why this case has never truly been closed. Not because we lack theories, but because reality keeps refusing to fit any of them. The Mansi people, the indigenous people of that region, had a name for that mountain long before Igor Dyatlov was born. Dead Mountain. They refused to climb it. When Soviet investigators asked the elders why, they said only that the mountain did not want visitors. Dyatlov knew this. He led his group there anyway. There is a memorial near the mountain now, 9 names carved into stone. The mountain stands exactly as it did in 1959, the same slope, the same tree line below, the same sky above. In February of every year it reaches the same temperature, the same wind, the same dark. And whatever happened on the night of the 1st of February happened once, in that cold, on that slope, to those 9 people, and has not been adequately explained since. If you think you know, the comments are open. I read every one. But before you write, consider this. Whatever answer you give needs to account for the missing eyes, the missing tongue, and the radiation that the Soviet government spent 30 years hoping nobody would find. I will see you in the next one.